Hey, this is John Ravage with Our Revolution Colorado Springs. Just a quick note before we begin. These first few interviews will have some quiet audio and points due to our current setup. We're working on getting access to some better equipment in the future, so please bear with us for the meantime, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to these first sets of interviews. This first one is with Lorena Garcia, who's running for United States Senate in Colorado in 2020. Thank you. Hey, I'm John Ravage with Our Revolution Colorado Springs. This is our first set of interviews where we're trying to promote local candidates who are running for public office in the area as well as the state. With me is Lorena Garcia. She's running for United States Senate. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your campaign?
Yeah, so let's see. I'm from Colorado, and I started running for office in November of 2018. And the reason why I decided to run for office was because, I'm just to be really upfront, I'm really sick and tired of politics as usual. I'm sick and tired of the game of politics instead of actual focus on how to improve lives. And I thought that really the only way that we're actually going to be able to change things is if we change the type of people we send to the federal government. So my background is in nonprofit policy advocacy work, so I've been working in the policy realm for many, many, many years, bringing solutions from directly affected communities to the Capitol, and many of which have now become law. And, I think that as an activist and as somebody who understands what it's like to live life and live what most of us, the majority of us, have to go through, whether it's with debt, whether it's with, lack of savings, whether it's with the idea that because, we might have been able to save X amount of money for 3 months and then an emergency happens and then we're back down to zero, just that constant cycle that most of us have to live through just to survive. I feel like that gives me a whole different type of perspective when we're looking at policy, instead of to make sure that we're not just looking at policy as policy, but looking at policy as people-centered policy.
Yeah, because I think that's something that, a lot of politicians, people always say, politicians today are out of touch. They don't necessarily represent who I am or who we are as a people. You mentioned, you got some laws passed in the state capitol. Can you explain which ones exactly those are?
Sure, I'll mention a couple. Otherwise, we'd be here all day.
Okay. Highlights, top faves.
So the one that I'm actually really, really proud of was a bill that when I was at 9 to 5, National Association of Working Women, I was working with Andy Kerr, that was then a House of Representatives, and together we were able to pass Colorado's first family leave bill ever, which was parental leave for school activities, which basically gave parents the legal right to request time off from school to attend school-related activities like parent-teacher conferences. And that was, I hadn't realized exactly the significance of that bill until recently, knowing that it was Colorado's first ever leave bill, and that was in 2007. And so now we're seeing efforts on family leave, paid parental leave, and paid sick days, and all of that is fantastic. And just to think that, without even recognizing it, I had a huge hand in making sure that we start moving down this path in Colorado.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's definitely something that people necessarily don't think about too. There's other countries where people get significant amounts of time off to spend time with their family, and it's not so focused on making a paycheck. It's about just general happiness of being with your family and enjoying that, and especially just enjoying your children as they grow up, for sure. So I'm going to try to jump to, I think, some more current events. I think probably the biggest current event that's come out of Washington recently is the allegations of the whistleblower complaint and the idea of actually going forward with impeaching Donald Trump in the House. Can you explain, your position on that? And if you were in the United States Senate, hopefully in 2020 we won't have to worry about impeaching Donald Trump. But just the hypothetical situation that you are elected in the United States Senate, Donald Trump is still in the White House. Would you support the impeachment of Donald Trump based off of the information that we have today?
Yeah, you know, if you had asked me back in June, which I was asked back in June, I was 100% in support of impeachment. I think that the fact that we are now finally moving forward with an official impeachment process is great. And at the same time, I'm thinking, why has it taken us this long? Why has it taken us to ignore the countless other allegations until we get to this one place where, quite frankly, it's not any more egregious than all of his other actions? You know, but now that we're in this place, at least we're here.
Yep.
But still, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's a whistleblower complaint about, you know, meddling in an election when you literally have a man whose administration is locking children in cages, making women drink out of toilets. Those aren't impeachable offenses, I guess, but apparently this one is. I do agree it's a little bit ridiculous, but, you know, at least we're moving forward. And why do you think, you know, in your perspective, you know, there's been this delay?
Again, it goes back to the game of politics. That's where one of the reasons we need to change our structure of government. We need term limits. Absolutely, we need term limits, because people who are making these decisions, the only thing that they're thinking about is how do we maintain control of whatever chamber we have? How do I make sure that I'm not going to lose my next election? Instead of saying, what do we have to do that's right for the country right now? And that, to me, is a shame. People who don't think about, I'm willing to sacrifice whatever it takes to make sure that we're doing the right thing right now, even if that means I'm going to lose the next election, at least I would have done what's right now.
Yeah.
Those are the people we need in office. Not these people that are waiting till they make sure that, oh, am I going to play my political chips right or not?
Yeah.
And I think that's what it came down to. It's just they're playing a political football game.
How much of it do you think also is influenced by like money in politics? Like obviously there's a lot of money in politics, and you know people have to fight for their election and make sure that they keep bringing in the donations and things, so they can support their campaigns for the future.
It's insanely powerful. Money in politics is insanely powerful, and I think that's one of the things is even now when we talk about elections. And people are constantly asking, so how's your fundraising going? How's your fundraising going? How much have you raised? And I talk about people who've raised millions, and I'm not anywhere near millions, but I'm not in it to try and raise millions either. I don't think that elections should cost that much, because when they cost that much, the only place that people have to turn to are people with special interests.
Yeah.
Our elections, one, should be publicly funded. And second, they shouldn't cost that much. We should have a limit on how much you can spend on our elections. We should also have a limit of how long the election season should be. I've been running since November. If I win the primary, I will have ran this campaign for 2 years by the time I win and I'm a U.S. Senator. That's so long. That is too long. That's too long, not only on the idea that as a working person, that I'm having to sacrifice so much for that 2 years, where my wife and I are now living even in harsher situations than we were, because we've had to shut down our one of our other streams of income, which was we had a small business. And the idea that because of this only wealthy people can afford to do this, and then they have their networks of wealthy people, and then they have their rich donors, and then we have Nancy Pelosi's, that's well, okay, I think maybe accusation 51. Now let's impeach.
Yeah.
Is that okay, donors? Okay.
Yeah, I think you mentioned too, term limits. Can you go into a little more detail about, specifically, term limits for, and across the board for United States Senators and House Representatives?
And Supreme Court. Yeah, I think we should have 12-year term limits. So U.S. Senators shouldn't serve more than 2 terms. House of Representatives shouldn't serve more than 6 terms, and the United States Supreme Court shouldn't serve more than 12 years.
That's a good idea, I think, because you see this reoccurring. A lot of people with similar backgrounds, and honestly, people with just similar stories go into politics. And they always talk about passing the torch, right? Getting the younger generation into positions of office. Where if these term limits existed, do you think that would help?
Absolutely, I think it would force people who are serving in office to really start building up the next generation of leaders. And I don't mean that, because the other thing that I find really despicable is when current elected officials anoint who should run in their seat.
Yeah.
I mean, I find that outrageous. I think what we should be doing as an entire society is we need to be building up the leadership and the potential of leadership of anybody. So if I win and I'm able to change our system so we do have term limits, my focus would be, how can I help get the next generation ready to run? Not just this next person. How can I get the next generation ready to run?
Yeah. You also mentioned term limits on the Supreme Court, which obviously Supreme Court is a lifelong position where either retire or you die. How big of an impact would that be? How hard of a challenge would it be to implement term limits on the Supreme Court?
I think it would be really difficult because it would have to be a constitutional change, and I think that it'll get challenged where the Supreme Court itself will have to be the final rule. And so if you have people, if our Supreme Court is with the makeup that it is right now, by what I mean we have majority conservative judges, it's not going to happen. Yeah,
and I think it's there's a lot of allegations recently brought up again against Justice Kavanaugh, right?
Impeach.
Is that your stance on that?
Yes, absolutely. He, in front of the entire world, he already violated his oath of objectivity. I mean, he already shows that he is violating the ethics of the court. He should not be there. I mean, like sexual assault allegations aside, just the fact that he is unable to actually serve the role as an objective judge.
Yeah.
He needs to go. He is bringing politics into the Supreme Court, and that is supposed to be neutral of politics.
Yeah, and impartial. I mean, I believe that's why that lifelong position exists, right?
Yeah.
So you're not influenced. You're not supposed to be influenced by politics. It's supposed to be based off of your interpretation of the Constitution or of the law.
But I think if you have 12-year terms, it's not in line with presidencies. And I think that that's still one of the reasons why they're saying, I think it would still uphold the idea of making sure that it's not one administration stacking the court for their benefit while they're there. I still think that when you're overlapping, one president elects or appoints one judge, they're going to be there beyond other presidents.
So something else that is brought up, and this is a local community issue. The Westboro Baptist Church is going to be holding a rally in Manitou Springs, I believe on Monday. They consider themselves a church, nonprofit church. Is that a law that actually, is there some reformations that should happen there? There's some reforms that should happen there?
There's so many churches. Almost every church is a nonprofit church, and yet they violate their nonprofit status all the time when they're taking positions and endorsing candidates and working on political issues. I think that whether or not it's something that we need to reform, I don't know. I'm open to hearing what that means, because honestly I haven't thought about the reformation of a church status. But I do think that we need to be we need to scrutinize these churches much, much more, all of them. Because I think that when we have churches that are given a blind eye so that they can do and act however they want to, then we have things like, not even just the Westboro Church, we have so many churches that are actually acting as terrorist groups than they are as churches.
Yeah, I think a good part of that is there's a lot of money pumped into limiting a woman's right to choose, right? I mean, and that goes into the Supreme Court discussion we had earlier about how fragile the current system is. But I guess my question to you would be, what's the biggest risk towards a woman's right to choose in this this country today?
It's the Supreme Court. That's the biggest risk against a person's right to choose. And it's not even just abortion. It's also access to contraception. It's also LGBTQ rights. It's also access to voting. I mean, we are seeing court cases move up the well-built machine of Republican court systems. so that the United States Supreme Court can overturn these rights.
Yeah.
That's our biggest risk right now. It's the fact that the Republicans have circumvented our democracy and have manipulated our court systems to get their unpopular, not even acceptable agenda through, because they know that it would never fly at the ballot. That's why they had to go through and completely erode whatever sort of independence and dignity our courts had ever, if they had any. But the reality is, I mean, the fact that they're trying to take us back to a period of complete and total hate and oppression and repression and even harsher racism than we have now, which is hard to think about if you haven't lived it. I mean, it just, it angers me. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was younger. I even went through and took the LSAT. Wow. And did nothing with it, because I was like, oh man, I don't want to sit and read for 12 hours a day.
Yeah, it's not for everyone, for sure.
Yeah, and the idea, you know, when I wanted to be a lawyer, it was the idea of like, I want to be able to protect and uphold the rights of people, and then I recognized like, yeah, that, you know, the people that I want to protect and uphold the rights to don't really have them, so why don't I try and make them happen? And to see that I was committed to this system of court where people should have the ability to fight injustice, and to see what it's turned into now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that
deliberately.
Yeah, and I think, you know, talking about injustice, I mean, even in Colorado Springs, there was a shooting of a young black man who was, you know, shot in the back, I believe, 7 times. You know, and this is not obviously an isolated incident. This is happening over the country. You know, as a United States Senator, what laws can be passed, or what kind of, you know, reforms can be changed to try to limit that from being reality? How can we fight the racial injustice in this country when it seems so ingrained in our history?
I think there's several things that we need to do. I mean, first off, I think we need to look at how we're recruiting police officers. I would like to see much more focus on psychological evaluations, and make sure that they're actually evaluating for xenophobia and violent tendencies.
Yeah.
Second, I think that we need to reevaluate why and how and when we give weapons to police officers. I mean, they go through a 6-month boot camp training, and then here's your gun, and it's like, what? When 16-year-olds have to drive for a year to prove that they can operate a car, rookies don't even have to continue their firearm training. You know, so I think that there's a lot of things when we talk about access to weapons and for the police officers, when we talk about training, psychological evaluation, and then when we look at when these horrible things happen, how can we make sure that these cops are not put back on the streets 2 days later?
Yeah.
And how can we make sure that we strengthen our national laws to be more intolerant of excessive force?
Yeah.
Because the thing is that we have so many of these cops that are just getting off because, you know, they get a claim like, well, I was scared for my life. I didn't realize that someone running away from you was really scary.
Yeah.
And so I think that we need to make sure that we pass laws across the country that mandate that anytime a cop is involved in a shooting like that they are pulled off, they are stripped of their badge, they are stripped of their weapon for whatever period of time that's needed for the case to be heard and for the case to be judged upon. And then I think that in addition to that, we need to make sure that the burden of proof for the defense, for example, like when a cop is saying, "No, I was scared for my life," that is increased, because I don't think that just their statement should be enough.
Yeah, and I think part of that comes down to independent investigations, right? Not having an investigation done by the same police force,
or even another police force in the same city
thing,
that's like down the street. Oh, come on, it's not like they're friends.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I think that doesn't remove the bias that can exist. So.
We also, I think when you talk about independent investigations, it reminds me of also our judges that we need to have judicial review boards, that they evaluate and offer reports on all judges at every level, which then would allow us to be able to not have to wait till the next election. But if they don't pass their judicial review, that they are automatically kicked off the bench.
Yeah, I think, there's a statistic out there that 1 in 28 children have a parent who's in jail.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more people in jail in this country than any other country.
Yeah.
How would you go about trying to fix that issue? One, well, I guess, what are the causes of that? And two, what can be done to actually, fix that or try to mitigate the number of people in the prison system today?
So I think there's multiple causes of it. I mean, I think one thing is, let's go back and look at the war on drugs. When Reagan was pushing we're building more prisons and we're going to get more people in jail. Yeah! I mean, that was, and the fact that every president since then has supported it.
Yeah.
I think we need to, and with that came our private prisons. So we need to eliminate all private prisons. We need to stop incentivizing more people in beds, but start to decentivize more people in beds.
Yeah.
We need to focus on restorative justice as a country and start working on if somebody is, accused of selling or accused of carrying drugs, for example, like there's a better system than just throwing them in jail.
Yeah.
Much better.
It doesn't address the root cause of the
At all.
rehabilitation.
Yeah. The other thing is, I think that we also need to address poverty, because a lot of what happens is when there's lack of actual economic opportunity to be able to get a good job, to be able to make a living, not doing something that can risk your life. I believe that we're going to see more of a shift to people not wanting to be in the underground markets that come with extreme violence and come with the risk of imprisonment.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is sentencing. Oh my gosh. Like
mandatory minimums.
Yeah. I mean, really? Like, that's just...
Yeah, I mean, I think there's clear statistics out there that, people who are in minorities are sentenced a lot stricter than people who are white. I mean, that even with, and mandatory minimums don't necessarily help that, right? So.
No, it doesn't.
And also, I guess another question is, would you be for the removal of cash bail?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people are stuck in jail because they can't afford their bail. Whether it's a $50 bail, even sometimes a $10 bail, they can't afford it.
Yeah.
I mean, and then they're in jail even longer and longer and longer. And I think it's, when we talk about cash penalties for whatever it is, whether it's jail, something, whether it's our cars in jail with tow trucks. I mean, like, cash penalties should be outlawed because they're predatory.
Hey, this is John again. Hopefully you're enjoying the interview. Our evolution Colorado Springs is extremely new, and we're really excited to be given this opportunity to interview Lorena as well as other candidates in this sort of initial push of interviews. I just want to point out real quick that we are a donation-based organization. So if you like what you're hearing or want to see more content from our Evolution Colorado Springs, please donate at PayPal or through ActBlue at Our Revolution Colorado Springs. Thank you, and hopefully you enjoy the second half of this interview with Lorena Garcia.
All right, so I think another really serious issue that I think, again, it's funny how the modern day news cycle works. It seems like we just forget about things that happened in the past. I mean, last week there were over 1 million people in cities all over the world, went out on strike for climate change. Here in Colorado Springs, we had a really good showing of, students and adults who took time off school, work to, protest in front of the city hall. Were you a part of any of those?
Yeah, I was in Denver, so I was excited to be in the Denver one. It was huge. I'm having this reaction because I'm feeling, I think, what you're getting at, where it's like this amazing show up for saving our planet and our lives.
Yep.
And now what?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, for me, like, seeing so many, like, some kids were, really young, less than 10, right? And they're going to be having to suffer these consequences of corporations and, oligarchy in this country have been doing over the last, 100 years, potentially ever since the Industrial Revolution, not really making any sort of change. They're going to have to suffer the consequences of that unless we do something today to address that. What can we do, and what value can we put towards implementing some form of solution? Is there too much money we have to, we can't put too much money towards solving climate change? Is it, because there are some politicians out there who, and even locally, not wanting to ban fracking, not wanting to, mitigate our,
I think what we need with respect to climate change, and quite frankly with all of these other issues that we've talked about, whether it's poverty or our healthcare that we haven't talked about yet, or immigration, what we need people in office who are going to be aggressive. Because we are well past the time of incremental change for climate change. Well past. We can't afford to take things slow. So for example, one of the things that I'm proposing is making sure that as we do the rapid shift to 100% renewable energy, that we also implement a 3% revenue tax on all fossil fuel companies. And I say revenue on purpose, not profit. A revenue tax, so that way that money goes towards cleanup. The other thing that we need to do is put a strict timeline of when we'll actually see a complete 100% ban on fracking. And what I want to see is that happen by 2027. Make sure that they have 5 years. They don't need any more than that. They've been doing the research, they've been getting prepared, they've been doing everything they need to do that shift already.
Yeah.
So let's put that mandatory timeline and let's reward those companies that do it faster. The other thing is let's make sure that we even things that seem not as difficult or as contributory to climate change, but we need to have a ban. We need to restrict our imports from responsible companies. And so, for example, our fisheries, where we get our meat, where we get our grains, they need to be coming from companies that are not in the United States when we do importing, from companies that are following responsible agriculture, fishery, or husbandry practices. Because, our ocean, we rarely talk about our ocean when we talk about climate change.
Yeah.
But the fact that our reefs are dying like crazy, the fact that we are overfishing our oceans, the fact that we are decimating species at a rate that has never been imagined in our oceans, we have to get back to making sure that our oceans continue to be one of the major hubs of life. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that we're fishing more responsibly. And what is her name? Sylvia. She's leading. Oh my gosh, she's leading Mission Blue.
Oh yeah.
Without blue, there's no green.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she has made it. She's committed to never eating fish again. That's her contribution to saving our oceans. I don't think that everyone can do that, or everyone should do it, or whatever. But I think that we need to be much more responsible in how we do this.
Yeah, I think my approach has always been do what you can do. Like it's not, especially when it comes to things like people's diets. Like there's this question that was asked in one of the last debates about would you make everyone vegan? And it's like no one's going to be vegan. Like that's not how you have to combat climate change. But doing what people, just do an active effort to try to restrict your meat consumption and restrict your fuel consumption.
I think one thing that I've been thinking about recently is how jacked up campaigns are also, because we're supposed to show up looking fresh and looking great with our hair perfect and our makeup perfect and smelling good. And I'm like, so does that mean I shouldn't like bike places?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've been thinking like if I just, whenever I'm in a place where I can bike, can I just bike? And if I show up with sweaty armpits and my hair's all disheveled because of my helmet, is that gonna reflect poorly on me? And if so, like, how jacked up is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to people aren't being represented by people who represent or who they are. Like, they're not being represented by people who look like them and act like them. Because I think a lot of people, do bike and do active activities. And,
right.
Yeah.
Let's try. I'm gonna start biking campaign events.
I like it. Yeah.
And I'm gonna show up with all disheveled and sweaty and see what happens.
I mean, this is kind of an aside. I guess it kind of does relate to climate. Public transportation.
Yeah.
Especially like around here. Like I moved from Kansas City, where they implemented a streetcar pretty recently in the last decade. Wildly popular. It's free for people to use to get from downtown to other areas in a couple of mile, like a 3-mile area, but it's free to use, and what businesses have seen in that area is incredibly more profit because more people are going downtown now because they have access to they don't have to worry about parking and all that. Denver, Colorado Springs, the whole the mountain region does not really have something like that. We don't really have a good public transit system. Is that something that we should incentivize and try to get access to?
Yes, I would like to see us. One, I wanna stop expanding roads. We need to. All of this money that we've been spending on expanding I-25 should have gone to creating a mass transit that goes all the way up and down I-25 corridor.
Yeah.
The second thing is we actually need to do this in partnership with our entire continents here and everywhere else where they have it. I want us to have what did I call it? It's a intercontinental mass transit pact, where with Canada, United States, Mexico, Central America, South America, that we all go in on it together, and we create a mass transit system that connects all of these areas together, and it's fueled by 100% renewable energy. And the technology already exists.
Yeah.
We just need to bring it over here.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it sounds similar to what China's trying to implement, and obviously what Europe has a very successful rail system.
Yep.
It's I guess why is there so much animosity to that? Like, there's a lot of people talk about that they love their cars, they don't want to give up their trucks. Is this a way to combat that? Just basically make it easier for people to not have to worry about rush hour, or is there incentives that need to happen fiscally to get people to move away from their cars?
I do think that we need incentives. I think the carbon tax will help with that for sure. I mean, when gas becomes too expensive, people are going to be more prone to, take public transportation.
Yeah.
However, we need to make public transportation affordable.
Yeah. Yeah, something else that's true. I mean, like, you look at the Denver Metro Pass, right? It's like $140 or something. It's like one of the highest in the country.
I think it was something like $1,200 for a year or something, where I'm like, I can't afford that.
Can't afford that.
And then it's also in like that system that we should never base it off of that system.
Yeah.
But I think that when we look at the carbon tax, that would help. But also, I think the convenience of having that there, ready to be used, I think is also beneficial. If I could take a train from Denver to Colorado Springs to Pueblo to wherever else we need to go, to Taos, maybe even up to Fort Collins, if I could get off at Loveland and cruise up to Sterling, whatever I need to do, I would be on that train all the time.
Yeah.
Because really, like, Chris and I were driving up here, and imagine if we were both, how much more productive could we have been? Like, he could have been working on campaign stuff, I could have been doing something else, which I was doing.
Or just be on social
like,
media.
Or
more ready time now, it's not quite good, but yeah.
And it just seems like it'll get to the point, though, where people are going to have to do the shifts. I mean, I think that's one of the things is we can't keep waiting for the will of the people to get there. I mean, unfortunately, we're at a place where we don't have time for that anymore.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned fracking before, and obviously Colorado is a very, large, energy producing state, with fracking being a big part of that. And there was a, bill last election cycle trying to outlaw that from at least from local residential areas, and that failed. How hard is it going to be to convince people in Colorado, that already voted on this once, that hey, let's go back in and take another look at it and try to get rid of it?
So I supported 112, and I also recognized the flaws in 112. In 112, there wasn't anything in there that would have supported a just transition.
Yeah.
So the fossil fuel industry capitalized on that and made everything about jobs.
Yeah.
And people freaked out, rightly so. I mean, it makes sense, it makes perfect sense why people are afraid to sign on to a Green New Deal, or why people are really hesitant to agree to do this shift. Especially when their livelihood is at stake.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's super important for me is to make sure that as we do this transition through a Green New Deal, is that we make sure that we have a just transition. I know that that's one of the pillars of the Green New Deal, and one of the reasons why I fell in love with it is because if we are not bringing along the families, and the families that have generations working in the fossil fuel industry that have given us all of this,
Yeah.
like we're essentially flipping them off and saying screw you and turning our backs on them. That's not a just or an equitable society.
Yeah. I mean,
And
we're the workers of this country, whatever position they're in, they're not the enemy.
No.
That should be penalized for
Absolutely not. And I think one of the things that I want to see in a Green New Deal is priority hiring, where the renewable energy sector has to look at the fossil fuel industry worker first as priority hiring to bring them on. Because I think one of the things that we can't ignore is that the experts of energy exploration and development are in that field.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily of just like looking for oil. I mean, that field has already been leading the effort on renewable energy because they're wanting to make sure they make their money when it's time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think education plays into a part of that too, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who they've been working in one, field of a fossil fuel industry the entire time. They might need to, get a new education.
Yeah.
And that might, there right now is a lot of barriers that prevent people from doing that, cost and time. So getting into the idea of kind of expanding our education system, what can we do to make sure it's available to everyone?
So there's a couple of things. I mean, one, within a just transition, we also need to be supporting retraining.
Yeah.
I think we also need to acknowledge that some people are just not even going to be able to be retrained, so we need to support them with severance and whatever they need so that they can retire.
Yeah.
The other thing is also transition funds. I mean, it's not all of us. I'm sure we all have the experience of leaving one job, finding another job, being unemployed, not knowing how in the world am I going to make ends meet.
Yeah.
I mean, I was unemployed for 8 months, and it was the scariest thing I've ever had to experience because I didn't know if I would, be able to live in my house, and so I think that we need to consider all of those aspects. And then I think for the broader education piece, I am 100% behind tuition-free education. I think that it's a no-brainer. First off, it saves the country money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just something that we should be implementing, and it's not just for four-year higher education. We need to also make sure that it extends to vocational and tech schools. A lot of these renewable energy jobs that are going to be coming up are going to need that specific technical training that we don't get in four-year colleges. And it's not about the idea that not everyone's ready for college and not everyone's fit for college, but it's just about where do you want to go right now, and what's going to be the fastest way for you to get there.
Yeah, especially it's like I said, a barrier for people. There's a lot of people who do want to go to college, but they can't afford it, or they just they don't think it's right for them. And I mean, that's the thing too is it doesn't just mean a four-year degree, right? Tech schools are still expensive as well.
Yeah.
Like people can't even afford to go to tech schools anymore. So
I mean, I couldn't afford college, but I knew that my only shot at getting any sort of job, I had to go to college. I'm swimming in mountains of debt. I can't save for retirement.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell I'll ever be able to buy a house because I have this enormous amount of debt. So the interest that they would charge me because of my student loans is just outrageous. I mean, so with that, let's also cancel student debt. It's predatory. Student loans are predatory. Student loans, the way that our college and our education system is set up, it only perpetuates the wealth divide.
Yeah.
It's not an equalizer. And if we really want our education system to make sure that our generations are emerging into being the amazing, just leaders of this country, then we need to make sure that they can actually go through it and come out of it where they're actually able then to be able to save for retirement, where they're going to actually be able to, not stress out about, shoot, should I buy groceries or should I pay my student debt? I mean, my wife and I had to have that conversation last week.
Yeah.
Can we afford our groceries, or should we maybe not pay the student loan this time?
Yeah. And I think too, rent plays a big part of that, right? And affordable housing. Like, I think, especially, this is definitely a countrywide issue, but we've been seeing it in Colorado Springs specifically, the rise of property and the rise of rent.
Yeah.
And there's been, I think, it's like now I think Colorado Springs, the cost of living in Colorado Springs is higher than the national average. It was the first time that's happened, I think, in 20 years.
That's absurd.
How do we control rent from getting too high, and more broadly, address the affordable housing crisis in this country?
I think that when we look at it at a municipal level, we need to, the same thing as when we talk about who we're electing to our city councils and as mayor, we need to elect people that are not just trying to make their cities the richest cities, because that is what makes this happen. I mean, look at Boulder, completely unaffordable. Yeah. Denver's getting there, Colorado Springs is getting there. I mean, we're at these places because we have these elected officials that are in it just to build the strongest, most fastest growing economy and whatever. And so I think that's one. It's who do we elect to our city, our municipal elections. The second thing is also about we need to stop giving so much power to developers. Yeah. Because developers are the ones who set the rates for their complexes, or the rates for their units. I mean, that's, to me, I'm just like that. Why would we allow that? Yeah. I mean,
not really. There's not really a fair, middleman there to regulate that.
Yeah, we need to actually also go back and redefine what affordable housing is. We can't, right now, we tell a developer you need affordable housing, you need 15 units of affordable housing, and your affordable housing has to be half of what your unit cost is. They're like, okay, great, let's see, my penthouse, $4 million. That means my affordable housing is $2 million. Yeah. Come on. Yeah. Like, affordable housing, we need to get back to it being actually no more than 30% of someone's income. Yeah. And then we need to make sure that part of being a U.S. Senator is that we are confirming the appointees that are intending to uphold the mission of these agencies. We should have a director of HUD that is really focused on affordable housing, that's really focused on that oversight of development, that's really focused on making sure that we are building our communities to be communities where everyone can thrive. Yeah. And that's not the case right now.
Yeah, not really.
Or ever.
Yeah, not trying to get someone like Ben Carson to run that.
No.
Yeah. I think another issue that comes up too is rise of homelessness. Right? People can't afford housing, and there's a rise of homelessness in this country, and we see it locally in this area and in Denver and Boulder, Fort Collins. Is affordable housing enough for that, or is there other causes that we can do to help people who are living out in the streets?
Yeah, it's not enough. It's a huge thing. I mean, instead of trying to invest so much in ending homelessness the way that we have, can we just give them houses? I mean, come on. That's just that you end homelessness by putting someone in a home, yeah. And then the idea that it's like we need to invest so much more in those programs that help people get back on their feet. Yeah. Whether it's You get a year of free rent. That gives you the opportunity to find a job. It gives you an opportunity to get your kids in school. That gives you an opportunity to do what you need to do. So that way when this year is up, you're set to go and you can actually start paying this affordable rent.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that even when we look at homelessness, people are so blind, I think, to homelessness because we, you know, as a society, we see panhandlers, we're like, oh God, those homeless people. And we see people sleeping in parks, we're like, oh, it's so dangerous, which is absolutely ridiculous.
There's a stigma, you know, people who are homeless are people who are, you know, they did it to themselves or, you know, drug users. I mean, that's just not true. I mean, like, half this country is living paycheck to paycheck. You know, a lot of people are literally a couple weeks away from being in that situation.
Yeah, and even then it's like, there's so many people who are homeless right now that are couch surfing.
Yeah.
You know, we have so many families, young children that are living in homelessness and in unstable homes because they're having to find a new couch to sleep on every night.
Yeah.
You know, and then it goes to our education system too, because our education system is not set up to support these types of traumas in students' lives.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's students that are living in homelessness, whether it's students that are, you know, going through a dramatic divorce from their parents, whether it's students that are having to go through gun shooting drills like every couple months at school, or it's students that are suffering from intense bullying because they're Muslim or they're LGBTQ or they're, you know, maybe going through with a learning disability. I mean, these are things that we have to make sure that we are shifting and transforming our education system to be holistic.
Yeah.
As the person, let's educate and let's raise the person, the child, not just focus on the academics.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, another obvious big, big concern and a big deal that's a lot of people have to, you know, factor in is medical debt. Right? There's several, half a million people each year go bankrupt because of medical debt. What's your stance on, you know, Medicare for all? I mean, there's a lot of, that term is used broadly across the political spectrum. There's a lot of different politicians that use the term Medicare for all, but, you know, they relate to different things. They don't cover certain things. They don't cover, you know, dental care and eye care and mental health, whereas other plans do. What's your vision for Medicare for all? Or one, do you support it? Which I assume, I don't think I know the answer to that. But two, like, what's your vision for Medicare for all? Like, what's your stance on it?
So I do 100% support Medicare for all, single payer. I think we need to get rid of a public or a private option. As long as health insurance companies are involved, we're never going to be able to have real affordable health care, and we are still allowing people to profit off of people's illnesses. I mean, it sickens me to think that people are making money off of people with cancer. Like, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
I think when we look at Medicare for all, for me, it has to be comprehensive. And we need to see parity in Medicare for all for physical health and for mental health. That covers senior services, it covers eye care, it covers dental, it covers physical therapy. I mean, there's like all of these elements that we need to be healthy. And I think that I also, within a Medicare for all, I want to expand beyond just Western style medicine. I think that we need to also look at the FDA and how they're approving and denying treatments. Mm-hmm. I mean, for example, when we're going through that challenge of using cannabis or CBD as medicine and saying, no, you can't because it's also something you can eat. You know what I mean? Like those types of things, we need to get away from that. And I think we also need to look at also the ways that we can start to bring in more of the Eastern style herbal treatments that for some people are much more effective than just a whole bunch of chemicals in the body. With the Medicare for all, I think one of the things that's important to me is also that we include the comprehensive services of reproductive health services. We need to repeal the Hyde Amendment, because if we're not actually claiming that this is here's your package of how to be healthy and how to take care of your health, and we're not including abortion in that, then we are continuing the rhetoric that a woman's body is not hers. And so those are some things that's
Yeah.
my position.
Right. Yeah,
I think just cut it there.
yeah, I don't think there's anything else. I mean, there's
Let's
other
do
things I could
some
talk about,
bloopers.
but so like accidentally spill my coffee. But.
Yeah, this is the first time you're drinking your coffee this whole time.
Yeah.
I know.
I didn't know if there was gonna be like
I was
slurping
afraid of
noises.
ice.
Yeah, I'm like bad. Yeah, there's gonna be like it's gonna spill over my shirt.
Hey, I want to thank Lorena Garcia for sitting down with us. Hopefully we can have her back in a few months to see where she's at with her campaign and how things are going. I think it's important to note as well that, we get to decide who the senator of Colorado is. There's the DSCC who has endorsed, someone who I would call more of a Republican light, and as in John Hickenlooper. We don't have to go with that choice. That's not who I think I don't think that's what Colorado represents. I think Colorado is a lot more of a progressive state. We don't need someone who is pro-fracking and who's taken money from large corporations to be our next senator. I really don't see that being also a winning candidate against Cory Gardner, just because there is so much similarity between those two people. So it's up to us as the people to decide who we want, and I think it's really important that we have these sort of interviews and discussions with progressive candidates to see who has a better chance of actually beating Cory Gardner and taking that Senate seat, which is so important for so many reasons in the next election. So that being said, donate, volunteer, do what you can for whatever candidate you think has the best progressive message and really represents your values. That is really all we can do at this point. So we'll continue to interview other candidates running for Senate, maybe even try to get John Hickenlooper on here, but I doubt that's going to happen. But we'll try. So again, thanks for listening, and keep fighting the good fight. Thanks. Bye.